Douglas Holtz-Eakin is here, the former Congressional Budget Office Director. Doug, what's interesting here from Hillary's report, when you heard that clip from Chuck Schumer, is that they've agreed on a framework for revenue, but he did not quote the $3.5 trillion figure. A framework has been agreed to that might be a much smaller ultimate figure. What do you make of that?
Well, it's news. I mean, that's the first I've heard of it, and I have been wondering how they get to the finish line on both the infrastructure bill and this big reconciliation bill. And the clear demand from Senate moderates has been for something smaller than the $3.5 trillion price tag, and they now have an agreement on how to fund something of unknown size. That's progress, but that's not the finish line.
You know, Doug, this whole issue and how it's sorted out notwithstanding, we're bumping up against this debt ceiling. Technically, we did so in July, I guess. You know, the Treasury Secretary says, as of now, if we don't act on it, we've got problems. What happens when that's going on? You've been through a few of these. I know it's happened 78 times in our country's history, but just over the last few years, close to 24 times. So what happens here?
Well, this is pretty typical. Right now we have a game of chicken. Republicans saying they will not vote to raise it or suspend it. Democrats saying they won't use reconciliation, which would require them to specify a number for the debt limit, which they don't think is politically attractive. And so there's a standoff at the moment. So the pressure has to go up. And we're beginning to do that. By design, Nancy Pelosi has attached the debt limit suspension to a funding bill for the government. No one wants to shut the government,
right.
But Republicans will, in fact, vote that down. That will fail in the Senate, and the finger pointing will begin, and there will start to be warnings from Wall Street about the danger of this. And at some point between now and September 30th, I expect them to separate those two issues, fund the government, and then they'll turn just to the debt limit. And members will start going home and hearing their constituents say, hey, what's going on? Don't we have to do this? And then it gets real. And when that pressure turns into
what are they doing in
the
meantime then, Doug? I mean, obviously, it's akin to, you know, people in their general home, if they're up against the wall, they got to pay the mortgage first or the rent first. They might let some credit card bills slide. What does the government do in a scenario like this? What are its priorities that have to be paid first and that they're going to focus on first to avoid a default?
What they are doing right now is effectively raiding government employees' pension funds, and those pension funds are stocked with Treasury securities. And since there's a limit on how many Treasury securities you can have, they take them out of there and promise them they'll put them back. There's an IOU, and then they use them to borrow from the public. And they've been doing that since July 1. These so-called extraordinary measures have limits. There's only so many treasuries parked around the government that they can go get and get under the limit with them. So they're running out of that space. There's no question about it. We will see Secretary Yellen repeatedly announce more clarity about when the drop dead date is, and more urgency about the consequences of failing to meet it, and more difficulty in managing the finances of the United States. And all that's part of the pressure that has to get them to somehow stop playing chicken and get this done.
So you are in technical default, Doug, if you don't make good on a Treasury note or bond payment. Does it extend to a Social Security check payment or a payment to a soldier?
No. The Supreme Court has ruled that, for example, a Social Security payment is not a legal obligation of the federal government. It's a promise. It's a policy. But they can change those at any time. They can change the pay and retirement of soldiers at any time. And it's the bonds outstanding, the Treasury securities that are out there in the markets that have to be honored, and they will be honored first and foremost.
So the 2011 incident where I believe S&P downgraded U.S. debt from AAA, first time, only time that's ever happened. It was not because we were in default, but because of the craziness back and forth. If that were to happen this go round, even if we avoid a default, then all bets are off, right?
We're already, the U.S. is already on a negative watch from S&P at the moment.
Right.
AAA, yes, but what we have our eye on you, and what they're looking for is evidence that the governance is not strong enough to ensure that the U.S. will be able to manage its finances. So this kind of craziness, the business as usual politics of playing chicken with the debt limit is actually negative from the point of view of anyone looking from the outside, and they may decide once again that they need to warn investors that the U.S. is not effectively governing its finances, and that we should be downgraded. That of course brings with it higher borrowing costs, and with as much debt as we have, the U.S. Budget is very sensitive to higher interest rates. If you raise interest rates by a point, you're looking at an extra $1 trillion in spending over 10 years. So we're highly leveraged and we're highly exposed to higher interest rates. This is not a place anyone should want to go.
Absolutely. Thanks for explaining that process. Douglas Holtz-Eakin, the former Congressional Budget Office Director, he knows a thing or two about crunching numbers, even when they don't add up, as is the case right now.